Well, good evening, everyone. It's always nice to be here. I know everybody's thinking, oh, we get to see David again. How annoying. But unfortunately, I had a little bit of a scheduling conflict, so I volunteered to come up here and fill in for today to give you a talk. And I hope that I can bring you a nice message today. And I decided to do something a little bit different today. Instead of working on doing something more in depth, what happened to me a few weeks ago was that upon reading a Spiritist work, I stumbled upon a message that really resonated with me. And I actually translated the message because it's in a book that's not in English, and I translated it to English, obviously. And I posted it on our Instagram account for the center, which is at love_n_charity. And because I thought the message was so meaningful and so deep, I decided to bring it with me here, and I decided to share it with you and perhaps analyze it from a deeper perspective other than just reading the message, even though the message itself already clarifies and brings us so much information concerning life itself. And this picture that I brought here today, this introductory image, paints an analogy. Because I like to think that life, our life, not the life in the material perspective of life that begins at birth and life that ends at death, that is constricted by the time, the conventions of time on earth, but rather life that transcends the time on earth, the infinite life, or rather not infinite, but the immortal life, the life that continues on and traverses many journeys in many physical realms. And we may think of life as the path that we take as this piano. When we begin a lesson, and life is such a lesson, or it is a lesson, when we begin to learn how to play the piano, we struggle in finding the proper keys or the right harmony to create a nice melody. And we usually press or are usually off key, and the sound doesn't come off very well, the melody is not at the right tune, and it takes several attempts until we become harmonious in our melodies and we're able to actually play something nice. And that is what life is. We try so many times, and oftentimes we're off key or we hit the wrong key and it doesn't sound so nice, but that is the purpose of life, this transcendental life. It's for us to have the opportunity to come back, try again, to recompose that work, so perhaps in the future, down the line, we may have our magnum opus or our main work of art akin to something from Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, something that's really nice, harmonious, and in tune with divinity. So what is this thing that helps us to learn and to progress and to actually formulate this wonderful melody in the piano of life? Well, that is this thing that God has conceded to us. The Divine Father conceded to us this divine teacher. Because life is the divine teacher. Because life itself is a gift. It is a blessing for us to be able to come back here and continue to progress, to advance in this ascension, which will ultimately lead to a communion with the Divine One. And another analogy that I can bring to you concerning life itself is that we can think of life as a school. When we look at the educational system of our planet, at least here in the United States, we have the kindergarten, elementary school, middle school, high school, and then you have the college, tech schools. Well, we can relate this to the spiritual ascension or the spiritual evolution. We are created simple and ignorant, a small divine spark with no intellect whatsoever. And we can think of a kindergartner as a spirit that's incarnated into a body, but the body is rather limited and its faculties aren't fully developed. So what does it need when it's in kindergarten? It needs constant attention, constant care. It needs someone to watch over it 100% of the time, lest the child do something that might hurt him. So we can relate this to the spirit when it's still ignorant and simple in its very beginnings, when it only has instincts. And what is this instinct? The instinct is nothing more than the guidance of the Divine Father watching over us. So that is the kindergarten stage of life. But then as we progress through the sundry lives, the sundry existences in the physical realm, we begin to learn a little bit. And we're introduced into the elementary school of life, and then to the middle school, then to the high school. And with such introductions and learning the lessons throughout these different levels of classes, we begin to have a greater capacity to utilize our faculties. We have a more ample vision of the horizon, and we have more room to exercise our free will. We're no longer constrained by only the instinct, by only having God guide us and help us in everything that we need to do. Now we have the option, the choice, because we've developed our faculties a little bit. And that's where humanity finds itself, in that stage of graduating high school at this moment. And then you have the opportunity to find your own career path. What talent, what gift do you want to focus on and develop? That's where the college, the university of life comes in. Because now you can focus on one particular topic and develop it within you. You have the free will to now choose what you want to do, to choose what path you want to follow. Yes, you still have some guides that help you and counsel you in finding what it is that might best suit you, but that's in essence what life itself, the progression of life is. And then you have those spirits that, having graduated all of these levels of schooling, now go on to do their master's, their PhD. And these spirits are at the same level. We can say that those that have gotten their PhDs, in this analogy, are those pure spirits. Those spirits that have ascended beyond all those lives and have learned all the lessons they needed to learn. And now they can come back, having earned that PhD of the sundry lives it has lived, to teach and bestow a lesson upon the students of earth that are still in college or still in high school. And who is the dean? Who are the administrators of this university? Who composes the faculty? The guiding spirits that are responsible for overseeing the large groups of those that are incarnated on earth. Who is Christ? Christ would be akin to perhaps the president, the head dean of the university. But who is the founder of this school? The founder of the school is none other than our Divine Father, because he has instilled in love the foundation of all of the lessons we need to learn, all of the things we need to do. And so from there, he set up the system for us to come and learn through the progressive existences. And that's why I think it's wonderful, because everything in the world, everything on earth, whether it's nature, whether it's what man creates, reflects the divine intelligence. If we really look into it and really think about it, we see God's actions in everything we do, in everything man creates. Perhaps it is a faulty creation or a faulty recreation of what should be the right creation, but it is a recreation nonetheless. And the Apostle Paul, he brought to us a passage in Ephesians 6, 13 through 15. This is the opening passage from Ephesians that's introducing the actual passage of this book that I brought, or for the message of the book that I brought here to share with you today. And the passage reads, "Therefore, put on the full armor of God, so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground, and after you have done everything, to stand." In other words, have faith. Accept the fact that you're here to learn. Accept the problems that show up at your front door. Accept them as purifying obstacles that are going to help you to progress and advance, because the only goal of each and every one of us here in this life, on this earth, is to advance. Nothing else. We have to advance. And you may be able to stand your ground, and after you have done everything, to stand. Because after we've gone through all the problems, if we've stood our ground firmly with our feet planted on the ground, solidified in the faith that we are here for this sole purpose of advancement, of progression, holding on to that shield, that breastplate with the aegis of God in front of it like a Roman centurion, and all these strong gusts of problems, of winds try to knock us down, but they can't, because we've learned to accept it. And after everything is done and over with, we're still standing. And we're standing in an even greater stance, because we've succeeded. We've overcome these problems that have presented themselves to us. Stand firm then with the belt of truth buckled around your waist. Jesus said, know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Because we understand that we are here to do exactly this, to learn the lessons we need to learn. Because we accept these things, then our burden becomes easy, or our burden becomes light, and our yoke is easy. Because the Christ came here, and he told us and showed us how we should act. He suffered, and he sacrificed himself. But never once did he complain. So when we complain, we ought to think about that. With the breastplate of righteousness in place, and with your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. Because now that you've undergone all these trials and you stand firmly on that ground, now you can be at peace. Now you can begin to enter into communion. Because you've left behind all of the burdens, all of the problems of life. You've overcome them. You've learned the lessons. Now you're at peace. That piano is in harmony with the melodies of the cosmos. Now you're able to focus on pursuing that particular degree in the university of life. So you can come back after you've earned that degree, that master's or that PhD, and bestow or bequeath that gift that you've earned to those that are still yet to learn. So now here is where the passage begins. And it is about this divine teacher. That is actually the title of the passage. It is the divine teacher. Or in Portuguese, a mestra divina. Pulling ourselves to the stronghold of delinquency and clutching ourselves to the hell of guilt to which we descend through the follies of our own will, the Lord concedes to us the divine teacher. Pulling ourselves to the stronghold of delinquency and clutching ourselves to the hell of guilt. When we act and we do erroneous things, we don't do the right things, we hurt others, what happens? The consequences of that is that we have the laws of God written in our conscience. And whenever we do something that goes against those laws, we may not instantly recognize it, but something is going to bother us deep within our souls, our spirits. And at some point in time, that's going to awaken. And you're going to carry that burden with you throughout your life. Perhaps unbeknownst to you, and you'll be unaware. But once you discarnate from this body and you go into the world of causes, into the spirit realm, you're carrying this with you. And what's going to happen? The conscience is what's going to produce this guilt, because it's going to be calling you to correct your ways, to go back to the righteous path. Because Allan Kardec told us in the work entitled Heaven and Hell that there is no such thing as physical hell. Hell is nothing more than a manifestation or a materialization of whatever our psyche produces. Because once we discarnate, we take with us all the baggage that we've accumulated through life into the spirit world. And if this baggage is one of guilt, one of shame, one of things that we've done, one of anger that we've harbored against someone, this is going to bother us, each and every one of us. And when we're in the spirit world, these things are going to materialize around us. That's why so many spirits think that there is an actual hell. It is nothing more than a reproduction of that guilty conscience. Because we pulled ourselves on the righteous path, we deviated, now we're stuck in this. And to which we descend through the follies of our own will, because we're given free will. We're given the choice. We've graduated high school now. Now we're given the choice to select which path we want to take. And this is where unfortunately, we make a lot of mistakes. God no longer is holding our hand. Jesus is no longer holding our hand. Our guiding spirits are trying to hold our hands, but we're not letting them hold our hands because we rebel against listening to the wise advice of that guiding spirit. We're so focused on the immediate gratification and satisfaction of the earthly and material things that we forget that when we do this, we disconnect and we close off whatever energy or whatever connection we may have with divinity. Because we're so worried about what's going on in the world, we're not able to listen to the things that are being whispered to us through intuition, when the spirits try to influence us to do good, because we're so distracted. And the Lord concedes to us a divine teacher that, buttressed by time, converts itself into the nurse of our woes and into the indefatigable or unrelentless or untiring angel that sustains our destiny. Buttressed by time. Time is that iconoclast that destroys everything. Because time is infinite, not the time that's constrained by the conventions of earth, but time that goes on, shows us that anything, any burden, anything that we harbor within ourselves is actually quite minute. Once we distance ourselves from the physical life and we embrace the reality of life as a spiritual life, as a life that transcends the various physical incarnations of this world, we realize how small the problems of life really are. Because we're looking now from a mountaintop. The perspective is different. If we're only focused on this life on earth, everything is enormous. Our problems are huge, our relationships are problematic, everything that comes before us becomes a greater obstacle than it really is. But once we accept the reality, once we accept why we're here, things become much easier. Again, going back to what Jesus said. That's why his burden was easy, or his burden was light and his yoke was easy. So it converts itself into the nurse of our woes and into the indefatigable angel that sustains our destiny. Because now it comes and it shows us that you don't have to be anxious. Don't be anxious in your life. There's no need for anxiety. You have immortality to resolve all your problems. You have so many lives. Time grants you, God grants you an infinite amount of time for you to do what's right. He gives you so many opportunities. He gives us so many opportunities through these incarnations. And it's a soothing thing to know this. To know that if we make a mistake, we can respawn like in a video game, come back and try again. Because we're going to be so upset by the fact that our conscience is weighing down upon us and creating this hell of guilt that we're going to beseech God to please give me another chance to right the wrongs that I've made in my past life. And it is patient and imperturbable. It returns to us all of the blows with which we dilacerated the body of life, so that we do not persist in the cage of error or in the prisons of remorse. Life is like a boomerang. If I take a boomerang and throw it out into the universe, fill the seeds of love, of good deeds, when it comes back to me, it might come back with a wonderful bouquet of flowers, showing me that I've done the right thing. If I throw a boomerang out into the cosmos, filled with seeds of hatred, seeds of angst, grief, harboring whatever anger I may have towards a neighbor or a fellow brother who's in the same journey as I am, and I throw this boomerang out into the universe, it might come back with thorns. And once I grab that boomerang, it's going to pierce through my skin and it's going to hurt. And that is the pain of life. The pain of the life that we did not accept to actually correct the wrongs. And what's going to happen? We're going to be given an opportunity to reincarnate and pull each brick out of our hands slowly and painfully, if we choose to do it painfully. Because once we embrace love, love soothes. It's like a balm that you rub onto these little injuries where it becomes so much easier. It's a topical agent where it eases the pain and the burden. So what happens? What does the divine teacher do for us? Here, it forms cradles amid atrocious sores with which it restores balance to our sentiments. So we're given the chance to reincarnate because we're carrying so much angst and we want to come back and right our wrongs. We come back in a body perhaps that's filled with sores, some kind of physical ailment, a mental disability, because it is a way for us to expiate whatever we're carrying within us, because we can imagine ourselves to be airplanes. The airplane is the physical body. The luggage that's in that airplane are all the things we've done. And if that luggage weighs that plane down, the plane cannot ascend too far. And the airports are each life that we live. So we take this luggage with us from airport to airport. And what happens? If that luggage is deleterious and insalubrious and causes problems to you, you're going to bring that luggage with you once you reincarnate. Because you have to remember, when babies are born, it's not just a beautiful, cute baby. Of course, it is a beautiful, cute baby. But within that baby, there's a millenary spirit reincarnated that might be bringing with it all of this baggage. Hence why perhaps a child, why is this baby suffering from so many ailments? Where is God? He's such an innocent child. He hasn't done anything. Do you know that for a fact? Do we know that for a fact? We don't. We don't know what his past lives were like. We don't know what he did or what she did. There it outlines, and what it does is restores balance to our sentiments, because these injuries, these sores, these problems that we may carry with us, it actually helps us to reconnect, because the body acts as a filter. It picks up all of the dust, all of the dirt that we accumulate through the wrong deeds that we may have performed and engaged in the past life. There it outlines reparative programs in which we suffer in the body the very wounds that we inflicted on the chests of our fellow neighbors. It's that boomerang of life that I told you about. It does come back. It does come back. It's cause and effect. We're going to suffer the effect of those things that we caused, whether in the past or now. And we might suffer the effect in this life, or maybe not, but it'll come back in a future life. Eventually, we are going to suffer the effect of any bad or evil causes we may have done to someone else or whoever. And what happens? We're brought into the world sometimes in expiations, because expiations are not very common. We all go through trials. Expiations, though, are a much more serious thing. And then what happens is the divine teacher concedes to these spirits perhaps that have had a very unhealthy relationship through so many existences. God has granted them so many lives to try and make right that relationship, and yet they can't do it. They've incarnated as brothers, as friends, as wife and husband, as parents, and they're yet to work out their issues. So now God says, well, you guys have transgressed enough. The law of nature says you have to right your wrong. That off-key piano playing needs to be righted. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you this chance to expiate everything at once, and you're going to incarnate as Siamese twins, where you have to put up with each other for every second of your life, and you have to make right whatever it is you did wrong to each other. In this way, you learn to deal with one another, because he is your brother, he is your sister, and he's going through the same problems, the same things that you are going through. We are all going through the same things, and it is not up to us to point to someone else, because Jesus said, what good is it to point out the speck of dust in someone else's eyes when we have a plank in our own? So now it reunites in blood ties fierce adversaries that battled one another in hate, so that they may reconcile through the intermediary of urgent obligations in accordance with the dictates of nature. Nature requires harmony. We see what happens when we damage nature. When something happens to the environment, what happens? Nature responds. It is a living organism. And what about those who abused their riches, the wealth that they may have had in a past life? What happens to them? Well, they come back, and they come back sometimes even wealthier, because they know that they did wrong. They wasted that opportunity to put forth those resources to good use. So they say, God, give me another opportunity to come back rich or even richer once again, so that I can do what I did not do, so I can no longer waste the time that I wasted in a past life. But then what happens? It's much tougher to reincarnate wealthy again, because it's so much harder to resist the urges of indulging the excesses that you indulged in a past life if you were wealthy already. So then sometimes they reincarnate in an impoverished situation, because later it embarrasses in painful deprivations in the impoverished and infirm home the many who rebelled in the abuses of avarice and an ambition without limits, in order for them to resume the service of true fraternity. What good is it if I have a silo or a granary filled with wheat that's been harvested, and I just keep it for myself? I can't consume all of it, but I want to keep it for myself through selfishness. What happens? Time, the divine teacher, buttressed by time, that iconoclast, is going to come by and rot away all that wealth that you didn't put to good use. That could have helped so many. It could have been done and put to use for solidarity, fraternity, charity, and it wasn't. It was wasted. So now you come back in a painful deprivation as a poor, limited individual, so you can learn hard labor. How to accumulate the true wealth through the sweat and tear of the edifying labor, manual labor perhaps. And we see often this, and we have to remember, as sad as it is, these are spirits, reincarnated spirits. that may have done precisely this in a past life. And they come back in this suffering situation. And it is up to us as brothers and sisters to help them to understand this, to show fraternity and solidarity to them, because they may have committed a wrong in the past, and we need to help them to right that wrong. And it is only done through love. We have to throw that loving boomerang out into the cosmos so that we may come back and receive even more in return. And what about those with mental disabilities? Those who suffer from physical disabilities? Those are the great intellects, the very intelligent people who put their intelligence to evil means or evil measures. Evil is a tough, harsh word, but perhaps something negative, nefarious, deleterious. They've caused damage to others, perhaps by creating an invention, by doing something that caused a great negative consequence to humanity. Or they've committed a crime to someone. What happens? Because they're so stubborn, recalcitrant, and reluctant, they reincarnate in this limited body, this mentally or physically disabled body, so they can no longer act upon those crimes. They're incarcerated in that hell of guilt, in that stronghold of delinquency. They're in a prison. Within that disabled individual, there's a very intelligent spirit, extremely intelligent, limited only by the physical faculties that are not 100% active. Because God, in His supreme justice and divine wisdom, grants him the opportunity to expiate his wrongs in that life, in that situation, so that perhaps while he's in that mentally disabled or physically disabled body, the love that he receives and the care that he receives from his mother or father or the caretaker, he may feel this, and deep within, he wants to perhaps return this to that individual. So once he discarnates from that disabled body and is free again in the spiritual realm, he now asks God to please reincarnate so he can show others that same love, that same solidarity, charity, and fraternity that person showed to me while I was incarcerated due to my own the own crimes I committed. Because God doesn't do anything to us. There's no such thing as God punishing us. There's no such thing as Jesus punishing us or elevated spirits saying that we're doing something wrong. No one judges us. The best judge of ourselves is our own conscience. God does not judge us. Jesus never judged anyone. He was impartial to everyone, because these are spirits that have transcended and traversed all of these existences. They know what it's like. They've been there in a long past, long time ago, but they've been there. So who are they to judge? They can't. They're not going to do that. They know much better than that. And they know that through the law of progress, all of us are going to be forced through love or through pain to progress. We can only swim against the tide for so long before the tide drowns us and pushes us in the other direction. And then it takes us to reawaken from that drowning, to come back through the CPR of divinity, reattach ourselves to the harmonious hymns of the cosmos, and swim with the tide of progress. So today, this divine teacher repairs the corrupted intelligence through the Calvary of disabilities. Tomorrow, with the chisel of ungrateful diseases, it recomposes the beauty of the spirit that our debauchery in the body often transforms into ugliness and ruin. The vices, alcoholism, smoking, drugs, eating too much, exercising too much, not sleeping enough, doing too many things that are harmful to you. Those are all, as Alex told us last week, unconscious suicides. You're harming the body, because whatever you do to your body, you're going to take with you, because you're accumulating all of these negative energies. And when we do wrong, that energy remains in our spirit, and when we reincarnate, it's imprinted into the human body, into the body which we incarnate. And that's why we are born like this sometimes. We are born with emphysema, with some kind of cancer. Why is that child suffering from terminal cancer? Well, perhaps it is because that is the product or the effect of a cause of the abuses in a past life. Or perhaps it is just an expiation that the spirit asked for in order to evolve and to progress even faster, so it can go into that college, that university of life, and pursue his own degree. So this, I think, is really wonderful, because it says, and it encompasses a great part of the passage. Here, the divine teacher corrects So here in life, we have a chance to correct ourselves, to correct our mistakes, and to do what is right. Later, it elucidates, because once we correct ourselves and we discarnate from this life and we are in the spirit world and we can see things clearly and with more ample faculties because we're not restricted by the human body, now we understand, and this elucidates us and it enlightens us to the true purpose of what we're supposed to do. And yonder, it readjusts, because once we realize the purpose, now we begin to play the piano in the correct keys. We've understood it. We've learned it. Now we can begin to write our own melodies, our own true songs that are going to be in harmony with divinity. And beyond it, it perfects. It perfects because once we've learned how to play the piano, now all it takes is the practice, and practice makes perfect. So the more we practice, eventually perfection is going to come to us, and we'll be able to play a wonderful melody with wonderful keys that are going to put us back in harmony with the true life and divinity. And tireless in its march, it creates and destroys in order to rebuild before the goals of the eternal good. The divine teacher creates and destroys. We are born and we die, we are born and we die, we are born and we die. We see this cycle in nature. In fall, things fall. The trees wither. In spring, there's a rebirth. Things come back. Things blossom. The cycles, the recycling of everything is very apparent in nature. All we have to do is stop and look. Nothing is wasted. God wastes no resource. We perhaps think we're wasting the earth's resources, but we're not. Because the cosmic intelligence that supports and buttresses everything makes sure that everything gets recycled. Everything gets put to use again. Everything. We come into a body, we leave the body. We come back into another body, we leave the body. When we leave the body is reabsorbed. All of those elements, all of those chemicals, all of those molecules are reabsorbed into the whole, so it can provide whatever it needs to provide to someone else or to another thing. Everything is a cycle. It's a continuous loop. It doesn't end, it doesn't stop. That is progress. It doesn't end, it doesn't stop. That's why when we stop, we deviate, we lose our harmony, and we have those nefarious consequences to our own selves. And in order to rebuild before the goals of eternal good, because once we're going through these recycling, the recycling of our lives, and we begin to learn what we need to do, we begin to erect goals towards the eternal good. So we can build a new home. So we can build a wall with a mortar of love and hard work, so that that wall can support the new levels, the new floors of our different lives, and the greater responsibility we accumulate as we progress. Using affliction and dismay, disenchantment and bitterness, so that peace and hope, joy and victory may congratulate us later in the sanctuary of experience. We've experienced everything we needed to experience. We've learned the lessons, and now we're ready to enjoy the happiness, not the happiness that's promised in the kingdom of heaven, but the happiness within. The happiness that we know we've accomplished, the inner Christ has awakened, and we're ready for something else. We're ready for a more important task. We're ready to continue to work, and perhaps to work even more. So a new light shines for us in the horizon every time. Every new day is a rebirth. The spirit leaves the body when you sleep, not completely, but when you wake up, you're reincarnating partially, and you're being welcomed to a new life. The sun says, hey, get up, time for a new lesson. And Antoine Lavoisier, who is considered as the father of modern chemistry, in 1790, he wrote in his elementary treatise of chemistry, he said the following: in nature, nothing is created, nothing is lost, everything changes. I think that summarizes what I've explained here. So, when we think of life or time as an infinite thing, not something constricted by the conventions of Earth, by the rotations of the planet around its own axis, or by the orbit of the Earth around the sun, but rather time is something that's infinite, because every planet has its own time, whatever it may be. That's where the human or the being that's incarnated in that planet is going to deal with that particular convention. But we're thinking about time that's infinite, a time that has no beginning and no end, because we can't fathom the beginning of the universe. We have a notion, a theory of a Big Bang, or even something else now that's been proposed by some Indian scientists. But we really don't know anything for sure. What we know is a minute fraction of the reality of the cosmos. We're still very far behind knowing anything in reality. At least that's my take of things. So we have infinity. Infinity that way, and infinity this way. It doesn't end. And we're granted an infinite amount of time to recycle through birth and creation, through death and destruction, and to continue to cycle through this, through transformation, change, and renewal. That's going to help us to progress, to ascend, to work on all of those mistakes, and to let the divine teacher that God has conceded to us to help us to evolve. In life, or the divine teacher, it resembles an immutable genie and friend, or excuse me, pain. Pain resembles an immutable genie and friend because it is meritorious. Because once we go through pain, we earn the merit of having gone through a lesson, a tough lesson. And we've graduated from that particular class, from that particular lesson in life, and we're ready for a new stage. Whose precious power remedies all imbalances and problems. So, what does it do? It reaches out to you. It says, come with me. Because you didn't choose to learn through love, now you have to come with me through pain. And pain is the trials that we undergo in life, and those trials are a blessing, not something bad, not something to blaspheme God about, because it's not Him that did it to you or to us. We do it to ourselves. So it is up to us to accept the invitation of pain so that we can work through all of that built up impurities and cleanse ourselves. And finally, to wrap up the message that I brought to you here today, this message is in a book called Ceifa de Luz, or Harvest of Light. It's not translated into English. It's only available in Portuguese. But I'm sure most of you here are Brazilian. Excuse me, my American friends, but the book is a wonderful book, and I suggest you acquire it. It's great reading before you go to sleep or when you wake up to a new day, because it has wonderful messages, and it was psychographed by Chico Xavier, dictated by the Spirit Emmanuel. And this is the passage that Emmanuel dictated. It was an exegesis. An exegesis means an in-depth analysis. Whenever somebody says an exegesis of the gospel, they're simply analyzing the gospel in depth. This was an exegesis of that passage that I showed you in the beginning from Paul the Apostle. So here we have a message from one of Christ's divine envoys that came to earth to spread the seeds of the gospel of love. And here is another wonderful entity dissecting that message. And I think it's been a wonderful message, and that's why I brought it here with you, or I brought it here with me to share with you. Let us remember, in the domestic abode or the greater road, before friends and the unfriendly, let us calm our own spirit when visited in the daily journey by the trial that imposes sweat and tears, and smiling towards the work with which pain has favored us, let us be grateful for the difficulty, accepting the lesson. Another thing I wanted to, that I just remembered, concerning the recycling of life. In another book entitled Roteiro, there's a passage entitled Spiritism in Modern Times, where Emmanuel as well says to us that Spiritism has unveiled to us the notion that death is only a part of a sequence of events or a chain of events in the services of nature, which I thought was a wonderful message, because truly Spiritism unveils for us the reality of life and the reality that we do not die and we are not necessarily born. We just travel. We're in a constant journey, and we travel through different stages, through different bodies. So let us smile towards the work with which pain has favored us, because let us work in a cultivation of that inner field that's within us. Allow that seed of love that resides within you, that's latent and dormant, to blossom. Water it with the living water of the Christ. Don't only read the gospel, don't only read nice messages, but accumulate them within you, absorb them, reflect upon them, and put them to use in your daily actions. Let it become a habit, because by forming this habit, it becomes routine. And by becoming routine, it's automatic. And you're automatically serving the Father, you're automatically serving the Christ when you do this. That is why it's wonderful. Let us labor in a labor of love, not a labor of pain, to earn that new stage, to earn that degree from the University of Life. And to finalize, this is really to finalize, there's a passage in Psalms 32:8 that I think defines what the divine teacher truly is, what it will do for us. I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will counsel you with my loving eye on you. So I thank you all very much for your attention. I hope that I shared with you this wonderful message, because to me this message was truly wonderful. And for my Brazilian friends, perhaps reading it in Portuguese will have a greater effect on you, because I know sometimes reading it in a different language doesn't have as great of an effect. But nevertheless, I thank you very much for your time. Thank you for coming here, and have a wonderful night. And I hope God blesses each and every one of us, and Jesus as well. Thank you.